So I'm happy enough to introduce two people I've known for a very long time and missed when they walked on stage, so hi. These are two very impressive people with incredible careers, and I'm just looking up their bios so I can get the right. Patricia Hadden is the Senior Vice President of Marketing for NBC Universal's direct-to-consumer business. So she's in charge of creating customer acquisitions and marketing reach for their brand new digital services, including the soon-to-launch Peacock. And Kathleen Finch is one of the giants in our industry. She has been a big fan and big supporter of this endeavor for, I think, since the beginning. And she is the Chief Lifestyle Brands Officer at Discovery. And before that, she was head of the lifestyle brands at Scripps, which recently combined, and is really just a kind and unbelievably insightful person. So without further ado, I give you Patricia Hadden and Kathleen Finch.
Hello. Yes. Thank you, Evan Shapiro. You guys are getting a lot of Evan Shapiro today. So I am thrilled to be here. I've been looking forward to this conversation ever since Kathleen and I connected about a month ago. We share similar work philosophies, similar life philosophies. This conversation is really for all of you, so please think about some questions, and we will make sure to leave some time at the end to get to all of them. So why don't we start with just, what do you do? What is your current role? And then we can kind of unpack that to see how you got to where you are.
Sure. Well, my current role is a little bit complicated in a way. I oversee 11 lifestyle networks. Some of them you will know, like Food Network and HGTV. I hope I have some 90 Day Fiancé fans who watch TLC. Woo! So some of the networks you know, and then some of them are admittedly a little bit smaller. But I, for a long time, was heading up the 6 networks that were owned by Scripps, which was HGTV, Cooking, Food, DIY, Great American Country, and Travel. And then Discovery bought us about a year and a half ago. So the CEO asked me to take some other networks on, like TLC and ID. So that is what I do. I oversee all those networks. But my heart and my sort of career beginning is really as a journalist and a content creator. Now I'm a pencil pusher, but in the old days I made TV shows.
So was that your first job out of school?
Actually, my first job out of school, oddly enough, I went to school in Northern California, and my first job out of school was working for Apple. And it was so long ago that Steve Jobs was still running around in the hallway. So it was kind of an interesting experience and sort of a very vibrant kind of place to walk into even then. But that was, I was producing, this is how long ago it was, I was producing videos that explained to consumers why having a computer in your home would be a valuable thing.
You did a very good job.
That's how, it was in color, it was not in black and white, it wasn't that long ago, but it was, that's how different the time was then.
Yeah. So walk us through how you went from there. Oftentimes, I think, at least I certainly thought that career path was linear, and you kind of start with one and you work your way up and then you get to where you are. And it's certainly not, it hasn't been that way for me. It's this kind of circuitous journey. Walk us through kind of Apple first days and how you got to where you are, and did you always know you wanted to get there, or what were the curves along the way?
Well, I think curves is exactly the way to express it, and I know that your career has been sort of twisty, as has mine. I think if you were to look around at people who have jobs like ours that have managed to now run teams and run departments, you will very rarely find a straight line. I mean, I think one of the most important things for any young person starting out is to remember opportunities come when you least expect them. Have the courage to try something new. You can always go back to what you were doing. But if you don't take those advantages, you will never end up in a place that, the two of us sort of accidentally have ended up in some respects. But I started out thinking that I wanted to be a journalist, and I was for many years. I was a producer at CBS News here in New York. Network news. And then, similar to you, I had a lot of kids. Together we have 7 children. Not together like a couple, but together we are the mothers of 7 children, which is rare. You don't find a lot of working women like us who have that many kids. But when I suddenly, with my 3 kids, was getting a little overwhelmed, and I was also married to a journalist, we were both traveling so much, it was just too much. So I ended up taking a job at a little startup called the Food Network. And this was about 20 years ago, before anybody really had heard of the Food Network. And I went there because it was a nice 9-to-5 kind of, this will work with kids. I had no idea it would end up being the opportunity that it was. I thought it was just kind of a dead end 9-to-5, whatever. But it just ended up being this vibrant, fun opportunity to rebuild something or to build something into a big household brand. And I'm just so glad that I took that leap.
So you touched upon it, but one of the things we bonded over is we often get this one question, which is, how do you do it all? And we typically have a visceral reaction because typically that question is not asked to men. And men have children also as a family. And so while we both have this visceral reaction, it is still an interesting question to unpack because having 4 kids, having 3 kids, having the jobs that we have, how have you managed to balance it? And has there ever been a point where you felt like you've had to choose? And what are those kind of, pieces of advice that you can give where what were the decisions you've made to get to where you are?
Well, the first big piece of advice I will give you, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, don't think that you can only do one thing well. Don't not have kids because you think you won't have a big job. I have 750 people that report into me, and I have 3 kids. And do I give everybody all the attention that they need? No, but everybody's fine. I think what you need to really remember is you can, if you really, really want it, you can do whatever you set your mind to do. Now, you need a really good partner, you need, help, you need to be able to go without sleep for a while, which, when my kids were little, I definitely did. But you can do it as long as you kind of, you admittedly have to give up time for yourself, but it's temporary. It is not, I went, years where like getting a haircut was a luxury. And as you can see, I still don't pay a lot of attention to that. But things like that, you have to kind of realize, all right, that's going to take a bottom rung. My kids come first. My job comes, close second. But you can do it. Just don't start out thinking that you can't, because you absolutely can. And I know that similar to you, I grew up with a mom who worked and had a really impressive job, and she was such a great role model for me, and she did it, and I survived. So there really are lots of opportunities for you to do both and to be successful at both. Just know that you can.
Yep. And that was my next question: role models, mentors, and best piece of advice you've ever gotten.
I think the best piece of advice I've ever gotten, and it's a piece of advice I like to give to everybody too, young people, just go for it. Just ask for it. Your boss cannot read your mind. Just because you're doing a really good job, if you do it quietly, you got to kind of toot your own horn in a way that's not braggadocious or obnoxious, but you have to make sure that people know that you've done a good job. Or you have to be the first person to raise your hand and say, I see a need over here. I know it's not really my job, but can I volunteer? Can I try it? Or I'm willing to come in on the weekend and finish this project. I mean, when I look around at the young staff, those are the people I love. The ones who are front and center, who say, what do you need? I see a hole to fill. I'll do it with a smile on my face, and I'm excited to do it. Those are the people that when we're all looking around the room to say, all right, who's ready for the next step? Those are the people that do it. But you have to make sure that we know who you are, because if you're quietly doing it in the background, we don't know, because we really can't read your minds.
It seems kind of glamorous and polished, but really along the way there are so many challenges. One of the things that I didn't realize going into kind of corporate America, because my parents didn't come from corporate America, they didn't come from America, is that every day is a challenge at work, and really how you show up, how you deal with those challenges, in my opinion, kind of separates those who succeed with those who stagnate or those who fail, because it is about, at the end of the day, integrity. It is about your character. It is about conviction. So talk to us about some of the challenges that you've had along the way, and how you've dealt with them.
Yeah, I mean, I have the unfortunate job of, I get ratings every day. Every day at 4 o'clock, I begin to twitch because the ratings come out. And I've got 11 networks that I'm looking at, and one can be up and you feel really good, and then the other one's down and you feel like, ugh. That is a challenge, especially now with the way the environment is changing. Peacock, which, I mean, I'm thrilled to death for you, for Peacock, scares the shit out of me, because I'm in the cable business. So I think one of the big hurdles is sort of looking at how the industry is changing, trying to stay really close and really ahead of all these changes, just to make sure that we can keep our businesses moving forward. And again, back to sort of the attitude, I think those people who sort of approach anything as a problem solver, this is an opportunity, it's not a setback. I mean, that's how I think we're all approaching the industry right now. Less people are watching television. We all know that. I mean, I'm afraid to ask how many people in this room have cable subscriptions. I know that you're mostly in school, but 2 years, 3 years from now, when you're living on your own, does the idea of buying a cable subscription even enter your mind? I'm not going to ask that question because I know the answer. So as we all think about how we reinvent this business, those are the kinds of hurdles that in some respects are really exciting, but they're also daunting. So I think the biggest thing is just approaching it with the attitude of, we can fix this. This is a problem, it's a dilemma, it's a challenge, it's an opportunity. Let's get all the smart people in the room and let's fix it. The defeatist attitude never belongs in the workplace. I mean, I've watched people, I mean, we've actually made decisions in some cases to let people go, I will say, who just had the attitude like, this can't be fixed. I mean, even if they're good at their job, that just poisons the atmosphere.
And so there's these industry kind of sweeping changes, and then internally there's what I've been the most surprised at is the politics that happen at work, and it often feels like Game of Thrones when you're at work. How do you deal with that kind of environment?
I have been very fortunate to not really work in environments where that was very pervasive. Now, I also ignore it completely. I am very open with my staff saying that if I hear about anybody gossiping, I'm going to come and talk to them about it, because I just think that's poison. Gossiping at work, no matter how tempting it is just not good. And I loathe it, and I'm very open about it. I don't want to hear that any of my team members are doing it or rooting against other team members. I mean, that's kind of the whole thing that kind of starts the swirl. But I'm just a big believer in just completely ignoring it and kind of calling it for what it is. I mean, I have on occasion sat in a meeting and say, I know that politics will not think this is a good idea, but, to kind of say, let's just cut through all the crap and just sort of, let's make the decision that's right for the business, not that this person over here in this silo thinks is good for them. I think you kind of got to call it out a little bit, but certainly I don't think I try to just avoid it at all costs.
And then switching to kind of managing in this competitive landscape, which is the theme of today. First, how have you managed to stay competitive? And then we can go into what you look for in young talent.
Well, one of the things that my business, the business that I'm in, is traditionally the cable business. So people pay a cable subscription, they get our content. But one of the things that we've been doing sort of aggressively is making as much of our content available online as we can. As a matter of fact, last week, and I hope some of you have heard of this, even though admittedly you're not our target demo, we just launched something called the Food Network Kitchen, which is an app. It's a subscription app, and our Food Network talent, Bobby Flay, Guy Fieri, Ina Garten, they're teaching live cooking classes that users can interact with. So Bobby Flay will be teaching, a barbecue class at 4 o'clock, and you can watch him live, and you can email him questions, and he'll answer them. And so it's actually very exciting, very fun. We went out to the Vanity Fair Summit last week and introduced it. And so things like that are sort of what we're doing to get our content in front of people. But the brands, and I use the word brands very specifically, the brands that I run are, a lot of them, those ubiquitous brands that have sort of a utility to them, that have a different way to speak to people, and different businesses that we can build off of them. So for instance, Food Network has Food Network Magazine. HGTV has HGTV Magazine. We have products, we have cookbooks, we have food products. I mean, we've taken those brands and expanded them into lots of other ways. Because if you're just a traditional television company anymore, broadcast, cable, it's all kind of the same, less people are watching television. So how we think about how we're going to monetize our content, build ancillary businesses, create new opportunities for a fan to engage with our brand, is the fun stuff. It used to be, when we got into this business, it was just about making television shows and then getting Nielsen ratings. Now it's about how can you build a brand, How can you touch consumers in a different way? How can you get them to subscribe to something? So it's an exciting time.
Fantastic app. If you guys have not downloaded, you should go download it now. I think there's internet access in the building.
Thank you.
So in terms of, I know you probably see a lot of talent coming your way. What are some of the things for this group that you look for in young talent when you're interviewing? What are some of the things that immediately you gravitate towards, and then some of the things that immediately turn you off?
I love people who come in and who are excited about the opportunity to work in this business. I mean, this is not an easy business to get a job in. This is, I'm not sure why they call it this, but it is kind of a glamour industry that a lot of people want to get into this business. So for every open job, especially every open entry-level job, I'll get 100 resumes. Half of them are from the child of a, board member. There's so much of that kind of stuff. You need to stick out. You need to be enthusiastic. The kiss of death is somebody who comes in who hasn't done their research. I mean, there is no excuse for that. Everything is available on the internet. You should know, if you're coming in and you're applying for a job at Food Network, I want you to know who all the talent are. I want you to know the schedule. I want you to know a little bit about me. I want you to know a little bit about my head of programming, my head of marketing. You should come in having done your homework. And if you don't, that just says to me, I wouldn't even give you the time of day, nor would I pass you on to somebody else. Because one of the most important things about any job interview is if you're impressive, it might not be a fit for that particular job, but I might have a friend at NBC who I know is looking for somebody, or there might be a different department. So don't forget that any job interview you go to, or any informational interview that you go to, it's not just about that day, it's about the next year. What else can that turn into? Keep in touch with that person. Whatever you do, if you don't send a thank you email afterwards, I don't care who you are, I am writing you off. And that sounds nasty, I know, but it is so important, partly because it says to me, well, they didn't really care. Or they think they have this in the bag. Send me a note, thank me for my time, ask a couple of questions so that I have a reason to go back to you, and by all means attach your resume, because then what I can do is I can start passing that around to friends. Met this young person, very impressive, not quite a fit for me, but hey, Patricia, you might have something going on with Peacock. So just take those interviews really, really seriously. It is so important. First impressions are everything. But by all means, please do your homework, or else it kind of makes me mad, like my time is being wasted.
There's also no excuse, because now information is at everyone's fingertip. I remember I had an interview when I was at CISO with Evan, which was a comedy-focused app that we launched at NBC, and someone came and hadn't even downloaded the app, hadn't even played around with it. So it lasted about 3 or 4 minutes, and then we went our separate ways. So that's a great piece of advice. Knowing that we all have inherent bias, knowing that we naturally gravitate towards people that look like us, that speak like us, that have shared experiences with us, how do you combat that when you hire, and what is your hiring philosophy?
Well, I mean, that's a really good question, and that is something that we think about very deliberately at Discovery. I mean, obviously what we're trying to do is get the most diverse working team that we can, because we want to have the most diverse audience that we can. So that's something that's always front and center. But I think that I'm so, what you guys are doing today is exactly what you should be doing, because you are telling us, and you are telling anyone that you go in and that you have an interview with, that you really want to be in this industry, and that you really care, you really want to make connections. Because I'll tell you what happens. A job opens up, and I'll get 20 kids who went to my college who might look a lot like me and have my background, who apply because they know somebody who, that is really a reality. So the fact, it is sometimes hard to sort of spread our application pool out, because everybody's got someone that they're referring that they know from some other life. But we are very conscious of that when we're getting resumes in, and we are deliberately working very, very hard to try to make sure that we've got lots of different people in the workforce, because we need lots of different people's opinions to be creating content in order to bring a broader audience. One of the things I really like to do with my team is, one of the mandates I have is everybody watches television, or at least if they work for me, everybody watches television. So if you have an interesting idea for a talent or a show or a concept, you can be an assistant. You can, work in the mailroom. You can work in the marketing department. You don't have to just be a programmer, because we're all the audience. So that's, one of the ways that we try to sort of mix up the opinions. But yes, being very aware of who we're hiring to make sure it's not just, somebody's golf buddy's friend.
For everyone in this audience, maybe they're still in school, maybe they're just out of school, and they really want to how do they get in front of you? How do they get that edge? How do they get their foot in the door? Because it is such a competitive environment, and we get hundreds and hundreds of resumes. How do you have that interaction, that very first interaction?
Well, what you're doing today is brilliant. You absolutely should be doing this, and that's the first line on your email when you send an email.
Especially since it was Halloween last night, you guys. Very, very impressive.
Are you still on a sugar high? Yes, so things like this are great, and absolutely every single person should be doing an internship. The only excuse for not doing an internship is if there's some sort of hardship, you live out in the middle of nowhere, you can't afford to take an unpaid internship, which I totally get. But any internship or any volunteer opportunity, you should be writing for your school paper. You should be working for the school television station or the radio station. Don't send a resume that has you working as a lifeguard all summer, and then you tell me when you're 21 and you graduate. Here's a story. A friend of mine, this kind of made me nuts. A friend of mine from college sends me a note. My daughter's in New York. She really wants to get into television. So first, bad sign when the adult writes you. Can she write you? Yes. Anyway, so I give an informational interview to this young woman. The reason that she wants to get into television is because she kind of likes watching television. And that was kind of the tone of the whole interview, which I cut very, very short. But that kind of thing, I'm looking at her resume, and no, she didn't want to get in television. Her dad just told her she had to get a job. And I know a woman in television, why don't you go do that? What you guys have to do is make sure that you are interns, you know people. When you leave your internship, whoever you're working for, get them to commit to write a note about you. Or who can you help me get in front of? Anything, use the internship, not so much to learn, frankly, but to network. Get to know people, get to know what the different jobs are. Because when you send a resume in, the reality is, and it's so hard to get that first job, they're all much easier. Just know that the first one is the hardest. But when you get in, you want to make sure that your resume has television on, or something, media I should say, has media on it, because so many of the resumes that we get have no experience at all. And it's just hard to justify bringing those people in, even for an interview.
Yep. Actually, 3 years ago, I met a woman here, Caitlin Decker. She ended up being my intern, and I've kept in touch with her, and I helped her get a job at Marvel, and now she moved to LA and works for the agency of record for Netflix. And she was everything you listed. She had done her research, she was kind, she was tenacious, she's wonderful, and she was here. She showed up. Half of everything is showing up. And you guys, again, are here the day after Halloween, so kudos.
Yeah. And here's one little, I get on my soapbox every year when I talk to young people. The one thing that you must do, besides being an intern, you must, before you graduate, learn how to be a good writer. Because writing impacts every single thing that you will do. Emails, writing a script, writing a proposal, writing your resume, writing a thank you note. Please do not ever send anything when you're applying for a job that has a spelling error or a grammatical error. Maybe it's just me, but that to me says,
And finally, when you do feel like giving up, because it sounds easy, but there are going to be a lot of doors that are going to be closed, and then you just have to wait for that one to knock it down. But when you do feel like giving up, what keeps you going?
I love this industry so much, and every now and then, I almost went to law school, and at the very last minute I decided not to go, and I sort of say to myself, ooh, thank goodness, because I really would have been a miserable lawyer. But I just think this industry is so fun, and even on a rough day, or even when ratings are not good, This is a really fun job. We entertain people. I mean, that is, we're talking, the two of us, about right now, we're both doing our estimates for next year, which means we have to go figure out sort of what we think ratings will be so that we can sort of put the ad revenue behind. It's a miserable process, but it's something we have to do. But at the end of the day, when you think about what those estimates are about, it's about how many people are going to come watch our content, are going to enjoy it, are going to tell their friends about it. That's what we do. We're working in the entertainment business, and I personally can't think of a more fun business to be in.
Should we open it up? You guys thought of some questions? I can keep going. You guys can come to the mic.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just a bit tall. Thank you so much for sharing. I have a background in policy and tourism and a travel business called Ennoble, and I focus on unique cultures, experiences, cultural fusions, and I look at communities and resources not widely marketed by the tourism industry. So, like, for example, Peru, Japanese Peruvians, Afro-Peruvian, Zapateo, certain things that you can only find in certain places. And my question is, what is your advice to startups trying to show authenticity, from the onset of marketing in the midst of, a saturated market with vlogs and videos that don't really speak to that?
It's probably more your area of expertise.
So the question was, sorry.
The question is, what is your advice to startups that want to show authenticity in the midst of, a saturated market?
Got it. That is squarely, I am marketing. I actually think you answered your question in your question.
Really?
And the operative word there is authenticity. I think we live in a world where there is so much noise, and your generation can see straight to, like, if there's a level of being sold to, you guys can just, it's like you have like a bullshit meter and you just know. And so it has to be authentic, whatever it is, whatever that message is, it has to be authentic, it has to resonate. And you see the brands that actually are accelerating and breaking through are the ones that have this, tone of just being true to who they are. And again, you see this theme here today of being true to who you are, but also the companies that are succeeding are the ones that are true to what they're trying to put out in the world.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi. If you could give one advice to your past self, let's say when you were 5, what would it be?
5. Stop being such a pain in the ass. Yeah. Sorry. You go.
Well, I would say, speak up. Don't be shy. It took me a huge amount of time. I had like major stage fright and just fear of kind of speaking in front of people. It took me a huge amount of time to get past that, well into adulthood, to get past that. And I think that it impacts so many young people. You have good ideas, but you're afraid to bring them up. Somebody might think they're bad. Somebody might think you're stupid. Whatever it is, just have confidence and speak up.
Yeah. Similarly, the best piece of advice I ever got, I wish it was a little bit earlier, so I give it now all the time, was from my mom. And it was never be afraid to ask, because the absolute worst that can happen is they say no. And that's actually not so bad. And so now I take that advice literally into everything I do. I ask for everything, and it is amazing what you get when you ask. To the point that I just got a free coffee this morning because it was cold. I would say, and you can take that into your kind of professional world, because oftentimes you sit in meetings and so, people are afraid to ask because they don't want to sound dumb, or they don't want to sound out of place. Just ask, because the majority of the time there's other people in the room that are thinking the same thing. And you only learn and get knowledge if you ask. So just do not be afraid to ask.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Michael. I'm an undergrad at SUNY New Paltz. Just a question for both of you guys. What was the hardest but most rewarding project you've ever worked on?
You guys hear that? The hardest and most rewarding project.
But most rewarding, yeah.
The most rewarding you've ever worked on.
That's a great question. Only because it's just happened, I'm very excited about this app that we just launched, because that's not anything that we have done before at our company in this sort of way. And we were kind of doing it in secret. We were, spending the last 6 months without trying to let the industry know, and trying to sort of, rally the talent, but not exactly able to tell them what it is we're working on, and working with partners. We couldn't really tell them what we were working on. It's that last week when we unveiled it, it was very exciting. So I would have to say, just fresh memory, that was one of the most exciting. That
you all now have on your phone since you've downloaded. For me, I've been very fortunate to work at phenomenal companies. I was part of HBO Go. I helped Hulu in the early days. I launched CISO, and now I'm on Peacock. But I would say the most rewarding thing that I've done is put in place a maternity leave policy at Hulu that didn't exist. And, thank you. And again, it goes back to don't be afraid to ask. So it was early days. I was like the 200th employee at Hulu. It was 10 years ago. And I was the first woman that went on maternity leave. And so I was, having a conversation with a very young, we called them talent acquisition leaders instead of HR. And she said, we don't have anything in place because we're a meritocracy and we don't have hierarchy and we don't have processes. So just if you need to take a couple weeks, go ahead and take a couple weeks. And I was like, I'll be right back. And I walked into the CEO's office and I said, do you know what our maternity leave policy is? And he said, yeah, I think it's phenomenal. I said, no, we don't have one. And he said, oh my God, okay, please go figure out what it should be. And so we put in place something that was at parity, similar to what ABC and NBC and Fox at the time had. So that to me was important, and even though I'm not there anymore, all the women who go on maternity leave at Hulu, you're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, so a question. So I was an account executive at Discovery for a bit, but my passion was like writing and producing, which I would do in the morning on the weekends. And I'm just wondering, how do your companies approach being someone who wants to be true to themselves at home and be that same person that they are at work, and not kind of hide their passions? Is there a way that you encourage that? Possibly.
So how do you stay true to yourself, who you are at home, outside the office, and how do you bring your true self to work?
And also how do you make sure that other people are doing that as well? Yeah.
I think you got to set the tone at the top. If you are kind of a relaxed, casual, regular old mom at work, I do think people. I'm sort of surprised when every now and then I'll meet a new person at work and they'll say, "Wow, you're so normal." I'll go to one of the international offices. "Oh, you seem so normal." It's I think that people, if they look at you from afar, or they just see you on, telepresence meetings addressing the whole company, they somehow assume that you're not like them. I think as much as you can show everybody that, we all started out in the same place. We do all still have the same struggles and the same excitement. I think, being a little silly at work sometimes is a good tone to set, because then that sort of makes everybody a little bit relaxed, and they can, not have to worry about bringing their real selves to work because the boss did.
Sure, and I think going back to what Kathleen said earlier in terms of what is your hiring philosophy, and if you hire people like you, or if you hire a team of rivals, and the more diverse, the more just people naturally feel a level of comfort to come as they are. But I would say there are going to be companies, I have left companies because I was not able to be my true self, and that's also just as liberating, you know what I mean, as also coming as your true self, because in huge organizations, as much as you want to impact the culture, sometimes the culture just cannot be changed. So then you just have to know at what point do you need to then go find your next opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much.
These are great questions.
Question, what's your opinion of the bubble in demand for engineering talent, and how do you attract good engineering talent when there's so much competition?
You said engineering talent?
Yes, so front-end, back-end, mobile, cross-device platforms, microservice architecture, that kind of thing.
Interestingly, we have just at Discovery set up an office in Seattle for that very reason, because we know that, my office is at Chelsea Market, right across the street from the Google headquarters. Well, where do the engineers go? They go to Google. But we need a lot of engineers. We need a lot of people to build all these streaming platforms that we're working on. So what we have just done is not only did we set up an office there to attract the right talent, we have an entirely separate HR team that just specializes in that sort of talent, because we realize it's a completely it's not the kind of talent that, that we are accustomed to attracting when you're in a traditional television business. So I think that's, one of the things that we're doing. Interestingly, one of the things that's been kind of fun is when we have now gone out into the world of the engineers and said, hey, we're working on this secret Food Network project. The number of people who came to us and said, oh my God, I love Food Network, I'll do that. As opposed to, working for an e-tail site or something.
So just wondering, why Seattle? Because then you'll be competing with Amazon in Seattle, and then Redmond, you have Microsoft as well, and then it's a short flight up to Vancouver with Twilio, or down south to SF with all the tech firms there.
That's why. It's because there's already such a hub. I mean, we've got a lot of engineers and a lot of tech people in New York and Knoxville and Maryland, but we specifically opened up. Frankly, I think it was to get Amazon talent.
All right, thank you.
So my question is, what should future writers and journalists do when facing rejection? What methods should they take to cope with the stress handling closed doors?
I tell you, I am the daughter of a novelist and a screenwriter, and watching my dad, as my whole life, sort of watching him with, I sold a book, it's doing really well, everything's good. Oh, I can't sell the next one. Oh, I have a play, it's doing. It's a roller coaster, and it is very personal. It's raw because it's something that you've written from your heart that you think everybody should love, and if they don't, you take it very personally. You just have to kind of develop a thick skin. You have to realize that when you're going to do something that visceral as a career, it is different. It's a different kind of career. You got to be strong because the rejection will come, but then the success will just be that much better. But keep at it.
Thank you.
And I would just add to that, because rejection is, yes, it's hard when it's in that field. It is in every field. Everyone in here is going to be rejected. We've been rejected. And so making sure you have a support system in place, I know you and I talked about this, is critical. Whether friends, whether family, whatever it may be, but have that support system because we all need each other. Last question.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. My name is Nazarene Hussein. I'm actually a PACE employee, but in my former life I was a TV news producer, and I still freelance in TV news on the side. And I love TV. I just had to take a little break for a while for whatever reasons. So my question is, I don't necessarily know if this would be helpful for the students, but as kind of a mid-level employee, especially for women, maybe in news and in television, what is your advice on maybe moving up when you kind of have hit a ceiling at previous news organizations or whatnot?
Well, I'll tell you, I left CBS. I mean, part of the reason I left CBS and as a news producer, part of the reason I left was because my husband and I were sort of wrestling with the challenging world of 3 little kids and 2 journalist jobs. Part of the reason I left was because a lot of the stories that you hear about CBS were true. And there were no female bosses at CBS News. It was very much an old boys club, and it was really hard to get ahead. And I was kind of bumping my head, and sort of decided this is not worth it. I think though that there are so many more opportunities now than there were, because BuzzFeed, now this, all of these things that have sort of sprung up, all these social platforms, they are in essence news organizations. It's not the traditional news that maybe I was doing at CBS Network News, but it is very much news gathering and writing and reporting and spotting trends. There are actually an incredible amount of jobs for content creators right now in those groups. What it's like to be there, I don't exactly know, but my husband works, who's a journalist, he mentors a lot of young people, and they all seem to be getting jobs at those
That's
sites.
a great point. I feel like before when we were coming up there were like 3 or 4 choices, and now given this golden age of TV, not just from a content perspective, but you can go to this new media wave, whether it's these BuzzFeeds of the world, but also the platforms, the distribution. There's all of these other tangential companies that are sprouting around television. And so if television is at your core, there's just a huge opportunity to figure out how to tap into that.
But you've got to market yourself as a predator. You've really got to be able to do all of those things. You can't just, in the old days, I could just be a writer. I could just be a producer. You got to do it all. But it is, in our websites, every one of our networks has a huge digital team that creates, how-to content around the home space, how-to content around travel. It's kind of amazing how many more people we are using as not exactly journalists, but content creators in the digital space, and it's a great career.
Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, I want to thank, I view you guys as our next generation of executives, so I want to thank you all for showing up. I want to thank Kathleen for her time and her wisdom, and Dolly. Thank you, guys.